Good evening. So I'm Mathieu, I'm the archivist in residence at the ZKM on Hayagi. I've been here since the beginning of October already. And my main application here is the research about the implications about the softwares, commercial softwares in artworks, and mostly my specialty is about 3D. Yeah. That's fine. So that's.
I'm Morgan Strickert, I'm the digital art conservator at ZKM, and I'm taking care of the ZKM collection, computer-based art collection, and I'm struggling with commercialized and third-party softwares in digital art collection. So that's why I'm participating to this program, because I'm eager to learn more and to have solutions for the whole collection that we can apply to the whole collection.
So I'm Winnie Soon. I'm an artist researcher based in Aarhus, working in Aarhus University. So my work is mainly deal with software, quite a lot. I'm also a coder as well. So I work a lot with commercial APIs, like getting data from Google, from Twitter, from Facebook, from other different platforms. And also my works kind of manifests as installation online or offline manner. So, but my research is more focusing on the digital culture, how might we think about technological implications in relation to political dimensions or social technological dimension as well.
Okay, hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sollfrank. I'm the artist who created the piece we'll mainly talk about tonight. I'm very honored, very flattered. The reason why we're here, or one of the reasons, is that, I don't know exactly, maybe 10 years ago, the software net.art generator was purchased by the ZKM collection, or actually an object on which the software is running, because the software itself is free software, was purchased. And I was wondering what has happened to the software in the meantime, because there were a lot of technical changes. And I got in touch with ZKM this summer, telling them that we made a new version together with Winnie. We kind of updated the version so that it would run again, because it's regularly breaking if there's changes in the API. And I wanted to let you know that we have a new version. If you want to update, so to say, the NAC machine, then the software would be available. And it was exactly the moment where you started to work on it, so it was a lucky coincidence. And we got in touch. And so we were basically, also Winnie was working on the software, and it was Mathieu's task to bring the machine itself, the object we'll probably see later in the presentation, back to life. This work we're talking about is from 1997, so I started to work with the internet in the mid-90s, so I guess I'm one of the pioneers of net-based art. My interest was in using the new technologies and the virtual spaces that emerged to experiment with different things that relate to the social and the political. So I always had a gender aspect coming with it, exploring if the new spaces would allow for certain things that are not possible in the real world. That was mainly what was called cyberfeminism at the time. I started a network in 1997 called the Old Boys Network, which was active for 5 years. The net.art generator was another piece, and probably the third one to mention is female extension. I will also quickly have it in the presentation. So it was a long way, mainly using the technology as a tool, not only the technical tool, but also as a conceptual tool to test and try out things in the social, in the political world outside, and then bring it back to the art space to, kind of represent or show the interventions. Meanwhile, so this whole work brought me, generated a lot of discourses, amongst other things, a discourse around intellectual property and copyright. That was also my PhD research. I've been busy with that for many, many years. And over time, it brought me to another concept I'm working on at the moment. It's called commons. It's of course related to free software and all that, digital commons. We have a focus on digital commons, and I'm working on a research project called Creating Commons at the Zurich University of the Arts, in which we look at and explore and study artists and art projects who create in our understanding in commons. So that was the short introduction, and maybe I should start with my presentation to give you also some images. So generating discourse, I already mentioned. There's different discourses, and I assume I will talk mainly about discourses that are either related to the art world, art theory, art theoretical concepts, but also certain political and social discourses, while I would assume Rini would focus more on technical. So I think each of us has a different aspect of discourse that is generated and related to the net art generator. So very briefly, the net art generator, that is the homepage. It's net.art-generator.com. You can look it up. It's like a new version of a very old project. It's the funny thing, if a project is 20 years old, like an art project, you will experience a lot of migrating into different platforms, accumulating more and more information that constantly has to be sorted and displayed in different ways. So that is the latest version. I try to include as much as possible, but I'm afraid there's still a lot missing. In brief, the net art generator is a Perl script. It's a kind of computer program. It's very simple. It offers an interface to the user. You can type in the name of an artist, and the title of the artwork. And this title will function as a search engine, as a search term, sorry. You click on the create button, and then the program goes ahead and goes to the search engine, retrieves material from the net, sends it back to the server where the program is installed. On this server, there is also a little script called Image Magic. It's like a mini Photoshop. It's a program, and this program reworks the images that are returned according to certain chance operations. So as an example, if you put in Warhol flowers in the program, you might end up with such an image. So of course that was not the first one I was doing. There was a lot of experimenting and trying out. So when I started to work with this, I was mainly interested in the notion of experimenting with the notion of collage in the digital, with automation, with chance operation, with also using pre-produced material, combining all these concepts with this small, tiny program. I would like to say one word where it comes from or how the idea was born, because like very often it was a total coincidence that the idea was born. Actually, in 1997, I was already kind of working in the context of net-based art and very much interested in exploring the internet as a space beyond traditional art institutions, beyond, say, galleries and museums, as a space where we could really connect freely and do things beyond the traditional and conventional standards of the art world. That was our utopia back at the time. And then the Museum for Gegenwartskunst, the museum in Hamburg for contemporary art, they launched the first competition for internet art. And I thought, well, this is exactly not what we want and what we need. And I was thinking how I could respond to that or what I could contribute. And I ended up, because they said in their call, they said they want artworks that use the internet as a material. really work with the specificities of the internet, not digitizing existing artworks. That is more the Google understanding of digital art. But like specifically art that is running on the net and can only function on the internet. But at the same time, I had this suspicion that they were not exactly knowing what they were doing. I'm a traditional art historian 20 years ago. And also this whole notion of introducing a competition was not well received in the net art scene. So my idea was from the beginning to disturb this competition or to hack it somehow. And what I did is I applied a flooding strategy. So I invented 300 female net artists who all registered for this competition. And the museum was very happy because the competition was so popular. And I also had then to invent 300 art projects to upload to the museum server. The museum did not trust the URL. If artists send the URL, the internet might not work and then we cannot look at the artwork. So it was part of the requirement to really upload the data onto the museum server. And that was the moment where I had the basic idea to the net.art generator. It was still not a program, it was actually handmade. I copied and pasted by hand random HTML code and saved it as a file, and then I opened it in the browser and looked what it looked like, and I really liked it, but it was a lot of work to do. And I complained to a friend who was a programmer, and he said, maybe we can create some sort of script or automation to this process. And it was like the pre-version. So he created, he generated the websites, and that looked really like a structural. They looked interesting. They didn't make sense at all, but you could see there were pattern and structures. So he generated it. I attached the name and uploaded to the museum server. Everyone was happy until the jury met because they could not get any meaning out of it and ignored it. Also, they had sent in their first press release that the competition was a big success because several hundred female net artists had applied and submitted. In the end, 3 men won the competition. That's how it is sometimes. And I decided I want to reveal my intervention. So I wrote a little press release that I launched at the press conference of the museum, where they announced the winners. And of course, the press very much liked my intervention, and they were all talking about that. And the museum was not very pleased about this, but that's how the whole idea was born. And the results that were brought back by this script I found really interesting. And I thought sometime after the competition, after female extension was called the intervention, I decided to look a bit more seriously into this concept of generating these automated collages and develop it further. So in the course of the last 20 years, I worked with, I think, altogether 7 or 8 programmers, I'm not sure. It was a mix of friends, people that were recommended, all kinds of, various circumstances, how you meet people you work with. The interesting thing was that I realized at one point that there is a concept for a program, but every programmer brings in their own experience and their own perspective and their own priorities or whatever. So I really like this moment of explaining them what I wanted, what it was for me, and them kind of coming up with a suggestion how it could be realized. So the 5 versions that existed in these 20 years are all very, very different, and I'm sure if we would go on working, there would be many, many more different versions. And maybe I will talk about that more tomorrow in the workshop as well, what the different versions were, how they looked like, and what they also produced. Just briefly, that's a graphic. It's not completely up to date, but at one point I tried a little bit to show in which context the net.art generator or works that were derived from it were shown. So it's of course internet art, net art, generative art was very popular for some time. Software art, code art would miss in this. It was in an exhibition shown art by machines or also serial art. So there's a lot of art historical, art theoretical concept that can be related to, and it was also shown and discussed in the context with. Maybe two things I would like to mention at this point. You see the red bubble is that's the net art generator, and I called it operative artifact or conceptual tool, and that's really what it is for me most of all, because it's a very modest, a very small idea, and it's amazing that it was working for 20 years. It's the one thing, and what it generated during these 20 years, which is not only images and text and websites, but it generated a lot of discourses, which we will see later. And the other thing, the image that came out of the image generator is something that the art historian Jakob Lillemose called a networked image. And that is a notion I was particularly happy with, that he came up with that notion, because I was struggling all the time with the question of how would I think of the image that is generated by the generator. It's not an image in the usual sense, it's not a discrete artwork, it's not an autonomous image. How could we understand this image? And also, does it make sense to pick, to select any and print and hang on the wall what I was doing? So what am I doing? What does it mean? What is this whole thing about? What kind of images? And with his notion of the networked image, I'm very happy, because the networked image, as he described it, is networked not only through the internet, the World Wide Web, but also through art history and through a whole history of appropriations. And it's particularly true in the case of the Warhol flowers, which is a piece I was spending a lot of time with. Is like an exemplary piece. There's a number of artworks or projects that were derived from issues related to the net art generator, and there's a whole series of works that are called This Is Not By Me. It indicates already that there is something going on related to authorship. So authorship, the notion of digital authorship and originality in the context of net-based art were, of course, the core concepts I was thinking about and experimenting with. And I showed you before this reworked Warhol flower. The original, I kind of reverse engineered it and said, okay, it's reworked, and then Warhol made it. Is it Warhol? What does it mean? Where does it come from, the Warhol flower? And it was kind of a beautiful coincidence that this case with the Warhol flowers was one of the first copyright cases in art history. In 1964, Warhol was sued by Patricia Caulfield, who made the picture to the left. She was a nature photographer. And as you know, Warhol was using a lot of found images in magazines and so on, and he did not think about copyright at all. He always said, when I buy a magazine, I own what is in the magazine, so the whole notion of copyright was very alien to him. And so this whole history of appropriations, there was, of course, another layer in between, Alain Sturtevant, for example, so you could construct a whole history of appropriations, of which, at the moment, the net art generator, the anonymous Warhol flowers, as I call them, is the latest version, but I'm sure it will go on. The funny thing is that meanwhile, if you type in Warhol flowers in the search engine, they are mixed in, because there is so many thousands of these anonymous Warhol flowers around, so that they're coming on the same level now. As I said before, I got interested in the notion of treating these generated images also as artworks in themselves and experimenting with them. This was an exhibition that eventually could take place, but the exhibition before I had planned in Switzerland, in Plug-in in Basel, it needed to be cancelled because of copyright issues with the Warhol Foundation. And that is what actually this moment really pulled me into this whole copyright discourse, because as I said before, I was interested in notions of digital authorship and originality. And of course, if you go deeper into that, there is the point where you kind of create a clash with copyright because it's exactly based on the notion of originality and individual authorship. So I thought, okay, that is really interesting, and I want to get a better understanding how art theory, aesthetic theory, and copyright are related. And that was my research for 5 years, where I went also back in history and so on. So here's a few other examples. So I showed it also because the legal state of these works is unclear. They're in a gray zone. No one knows. There was a moment where I got interested really in not only in the legal concept, but also in the legal thinking. What is behind this? What kind of thinking is behind copyright? And that was one of the first works I did. This was trying to answer the question: who is the author of such an automatically generated images on the basis of copyright law and legal commentary. So I wrote a legal expertise as an artistic intervention, and this is a very boring video where I read 16 pages of legal expertise. The conclusion is kind of interesting. Here's the different possibilities of who could an author be. The legal conclusion is very interesting and was a big surprise because I'm the only one that can be excluded from possible authors because I just created the idea and doesn't count in terms of copyright. So the law would suggest it's a mix, co-authorship between original author and the programmer. But of course, it was particularly interesting because in the art context, of course, I'm referred to as the author. So it was just another of the absurdities related to copyright law. It was not enough. I thought I also really consult legal experts. So these are 4 copyright experts to whom I submitted the case, and they agreed to be filmed. And this is actually what I presented instead of the originally intended exhibition that was cancelled. So they were talking about the project and the images and explaining why they cannot be there or why they should be there and why it's not a problem. The funny thing was about this installation is that these 4 experts came to 4 completely different conclusions about the legal status. So that gave me a deep insight into the nature of law, and particularly copyright law, and an understanding of what actually this gray zone really is and what it means to operate and what kind of factors you have to consider if you enter it as a practitioner. So after some time I got a bit tired of this also gray zone and not knowing, and a lot of people recommended me. They said, well, if you want to exhibit it, if you want to sell the works, if you want to have clarity about copyright, why don't you ask just the rights holder? Clear the rights and then everything is okay. And that's of course the last thing you want to do as an artist. You don't want to ask for permission. So, but I did it in a kind of a translated or transferred way because I was always very fascinated about Andy Warhol's interview techniques. And I thought, why not having a conversation with Andy Warhol, asking him for permission? So I made this video, which is an edited video where I added together original parts of Warhol interview with me asking him questions, explaining about the net.art generator. It was a bit painful conversation because he doesn't talk much, but in the end he gave me permission, so that was wonderful. So I thought, problem solved. In fact, it was not solved because the filmmaker who shot the original interview, he sent a cease and desist letter to Hattie Kranz, who had published this photograph in a book. So it went on and on. But yeah. This is another graphic just to show you a little bit this kind of discourse generating. We again have the net.art generator, the conceptual tool, and a networked image, an original motif. So I'm doing workshops around it. Of course, we have the online archive on the side of the net.art generator, where it's sitting on the server. There's the archive of all the images, which is not publicly accessible. I have prints, the different videos and installations. And that is basically what I used as a practice part of my practice-based PhD. So I was operating in this field that I described, and that were the artworks related. Then I got an invitation to the exhibition called Art Machines, Machine Art. They wanted to show the net.art generator. It was at the Kunsthalle and Museum Tangli in Basel. And I said it doesn't make much sense to just put the desktop computer with this program. I mean, everyone can have it at home. It was not the case in the beginning. That's also something that's interesting. In the beginning, in like 98, when we put it in the museum or in an exhibition context, people were really scared to sit down and type in a word and to hit the button because it could break something. And now it's nice to see the difference because everyone is all the time using search engines and people have, it's just another another way to kind of read a development, related to the tool. So when I got this invitation, I said, well, I don't put the computer, that makes no sense. If I agree to be part of the exhibition, there should be something else, which is normally not there. And so we came up with the idea to build a server, because the program, as I said before, is running on the server. And so I thought, because the server is something very hidden normally, it's in some whatever storage and people don't access the server. And to get a better understanding of this kind of how your interface, how your computer is connected to a server, or that it's there and what is going on there, we decided to build this object. And so I got this old box, it's a wooden box, and inside the box we installed the server. You can see like the inside. It's the monitor, there's a monitor surface, or it's like a lid, but it's transparent, you can lift it and then you can see the parts. And you can, I think that is a video. I'm not. Oh, maybe I'm running out of time anyway. But that's, I think you get the idea. It's the box that is sitting, you saw in the images before, it's sitting in the gallery space next to where people operate the computer. And while someone is typing in a search term, you can see the code running on the server and operating. You see basically how the machine is working, producing something that it takes back to the desktop.
We'll bring the box tomorrow at the workshop.
Yeah, and that is actually the corpus delicti we're dealing with tomorrow. That is what was bought by the collection, and on this server, the code is running, and this code breaks sometimes. But not only the code, also the hardware parts are kind of falling apart sometimes.
Hard drive, for example.
Yeah, and Mathieu we were talking on the phone sometime, and he asked me if he can replace parts, and I said, of course you can replace all technical parts, but please not the wooden box, it's kind of unique. And then you told me that when you opened it, you almost got a heart attack because there was a little worm that had started to eat the wood, but it was only one, so it's still there. Okay, so what else do we have? Yeah, I mean, all the details, the different exhibition was involved, but also the different versions, the interfaces, the code is available. That's also interesting. So the only point where we are dealing with commercial software, the code itself it's Perl script, it's under free license. The code is on the website, but we are dealing with commercial search engines at the moment. So that is kind of the breaking point very often, or the point where it can get expensive. So here's all the information. And maybe one little thing is when we were trying, because the last time it broke, it was because Google changed their access policies. And we were thinking of how we should deal with it, because I'm not willing to pay Google. What did we calculate? Something like, I don't know. It would be like $1,500 a year for reasonable access to to the API. And so I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to do it. Also, I'm not the only artist who has a problem. There's a lot of artists who are dealing with API requests, so we should get organized, we should approach Google, we should. So before I just fixed it, I thought I'll make it into a bigger structural discourse, another discourse. And that turned out to be rather difficult because it's not so easy to find people to talk to at Google. That's the first thing. We managed eventually. But then, you know, policy making, and especially when it comes to policy making with regards to, I mean, they have this cultural institute, what they think, what is called art and culture, and what Google contributes. It's not exactly what we ask them to do. So there's a long way to go, but we are working on it. But, you know, with institutions, it was also became very evident. It's not something you can do as an individual artist. You have to collaborate with institutions and kind of communicate the structural problem behind, and that's what we are doing in parallel because it showed that it will be a long way. So we are planning certain things and also symposia and so on. But during that time, well, for now, there is a free version which allows for 100 requests per day for free, which is almost nothing. So last night we were sitting and actually calculating what is a Google day, when does a Google day start? So the counter goes to 0 because every time we try to generate, it's not working. It says 100 requests exceeded. You know, we are teaching Google, but they are not there yet. So we found out it's actually Californian midnight, so it's 9 o'clock our time. So if you really want to generate, get up early, be ready at 9 o'clock.
I made a class in my school because I'm also a researcher in a lab in a school of art. And we started at 10:30 in the morning and we couldn't get any image.
This morning I tried to wait from 8:30 to 9:30 and just try to click and see when it restart. So we finally find out it's like at 9 reset, and then immediately like at 12:30 it just existed in. Yeah. So it's very popular in the last few days.
It's the first time that you saw me net.art generator. When I arrived here, it didn't work because it was already late. So we planned to wake up early so that I can understand how it works.
So yeah, for the version of the museum, we have our own server. So we have our own 100 requests.
Oh.
And we talk about it because it's going to be exhibited in November next year. And it's last maybe 1 hour into the exhibition space. If we have maybe 10 persons doing 10 researches, in 1 hour we will reach the 100
Yeah,
requests.
the reason why we decided in the end to go for that, for now at least, was because it shows the limitation. So I created a very nice error message in explaining to the user, it's not because the thing is broken, it's because Google shuts us down. So that's a kind of also a sort of an intervention. So to show the limitation, I think is also part of the project now. And the other idea that was created with a third collaborator is the crowd API. Is the idea that we ask people, especially for a case like when there's an exhibition or when it's announced or something in the media, it gets very busy. We ask people to generate their own Google IDs and keys that they donate to the project, and we add some lines to the script that when 100 requests are exceeded, it jumps to the next key. But that is not according to the terms of use of Google, so it's kind of illegal, but we're going to do that within an exhibition in London next year. So we announce it that we're doing it, and so it's an artistic intervention.
And I would like also to append for the exhibition, for the collection exhibition.
You know, if you're brave enough here to do it.
Actually, I wanted to jump on to what you said about Google, how to reach Google. And actually, you are not reaching them, they are reaching you. And we just been reached by Google.
For this project?
No, for another one in Open Codes 2. It's using a speech-to-text or text-to-speech software also by Google, and our technician, Daniel Heiss, just been contacted by Google because he is changing ID also when he exceeded 300 euros credits. I think you can open an ID and you have like 300 euro credits to use the text-to-speech software. So they contacted him because they saw that it was always the same person but with a different ID, and he really put his phone number from the ZKM. And when he had people from Google on the telephone, it just said the truth. It said everything. We are a museum, we are working on this, and they now are, the ZKM is now in tolerated case.
Harmless.
We have now, we are being stamped tolerated, not dangerous, harmless.
Yeah, I think we should document it. Did you document it?
Yeah, we're gonna do it for Daniel, but so they know us, they know ZKM, and that's why I'm pretty confident if we continue that they will continue to call us and we can discuss with them.
Can you request more access and using the names of ZKM? Request for like, can you grant us for more?
No, but they won't. They didn't contact us after that. They know we are doing this. They know we are kind of hacking the system, but they didn't made any procedure against us. So they say they could tolerate us, but we still need to do the hacking. They won't give us more credits or anything. But if we start to talk about it and communicate about it, saying, hey, Google sometimes is making exceptions, maybe you could do really like in your policy an exception for museums and artists. And this is my hope right now. And this just came up last week, so...
There is a policy by Google for non-profit organizations.
Yeah,
there was an in-between idea we had. We wanted to work with the HEC, the House for Electronic Arts in Basel. And we were looking into this, and they were ready to take it on their server and ask for this, exception, which exists. And we were shortly before implementing, we found out that it will run out in March in 2018. And I was like, well, that makes no sense. But it existed, but it will stop.
So
but they have
maybe
to
they will
replace
tolerate us till March then. Maybe. But I want to continue and have them on the phone. I just talked about this project at the BNF last week, the symposium on data art and posterity. And they say the people in the audience, they were people from the web also, and they said we need to think big and to call the library, the Congress Library, and all the big institutions that are trying to archive the internet. Like I think the Library of Congress is trying to archive the Twitter, and you have active archives also. And so they say we need to think big and have big institutions like BNF, and do an action and ask for an exception. So it's true that only one artist cannot do so much. Even just one institution cannot do so much. But the good thing is that Google knows us now. They know we are here and we are
So
doing
it must
things.
be so exciting when your phone rings and there is Google calling.
Yeah. And Daniel just told me this during the coffee, Oh yeah, I've talked to Google and I'm interested in your workshop you're doing next week. And I was, you have Google on the phone?
Who wants to continue? You want to present?
I can talk a bit about
You want to sit?
Google.
You have to sit here. Oh no,
yeah.
you have your own.
No, I have to sit.
You need this.
And if you have questions, prepare them because there is a microphone waiting for you after.
So I think for my part, I will also talk something around the art generator, but more. So when I actually start thinking about this symposium or this discussion, I've been thinking about what might be the discourse that I can generate or we can generate in this context, as well as by bringing me, Cornelia bring me into this project. So I've been always interested in disruptions or interested in something not working, something that is not executable. So because this is really the moment of time that you can sort of review some of the infrastructure or some of the underlying policies, or that we are aware actually the technology is not something just very user-friendly, or it's not something that is neutral in a way. So I try to frame like my discourse for this context as something called the inexecutable query. So which is something related to like the software, net art generator, how it approach Google, and how it's something that is not able to request the search images, and how it returns error. This kind of negotiation with Google from a machine's perspective. So this is just a little bit background as well, how I get involved into the project, and how Cornelia find me, ask about can you help to fix the project, and what does it really mean by fixing the project? Does it really the same artwork? So what is the problem? You know, is it the software problem, or is it Google problem? What exactly it is? So this is the image in 2015. That was the time I was sort of first time being introduced with this net art generator, and it worked perfectly fine. That's the earlier version that I experienced the work. And then in 2015, October, so when I accessed the page again, it showed this error message. And I'm fascinated with all sort of error message. So this one is like, we are sorry, net art generator is currently not operational. So it becomes very interesting to me to think about why it didn't work. It's exposed some of the infrastructure and materiality of the internet or of the computation. And then this is the image that Cornelia just mentioned. This is the latest version that we have uploaded on the server. And when you type in the title and then the artist, and then you click create, if it exceeds 100 requests, then you will get this message. So it's like, thanks for using net.art. Unfortunately, it seems that if the limit of queries for today is already exceeded. And then go on with the line, and then the last one is like, in the long run, we are working on teaching Google about how they can support art on the internet in a meaningful way, but there's still a long way to go. So I've been also thinking about, like, because Google as an institution, they have been all along very supportive to art, technology, and experimentation. But of course, it's very confined to his way of defining what is art, right? But of course, as you also mentioned as well, like there are actually other artists working with Google, but they are not able to even use non-profit organization or get more access to what they have offered. So this is a question for us to also think about, like how Google might able to support art in different ways, I think. And then this is sort of like a timeline of the net art generator version 5B, I call. The development timeline that I sort of stepped in the project. So since the beginning in September that I showed you the screenshot that something worked perfectly fine. And then just a month later in October, something not working. And then some of the things that I want to highlight is that in January 10th, 2017, so which is almost like a year and a half after the art generator was not working. So Cornelia sent me an email, an invitation asking me whether I would be interested to look into the project and also to fix the Google API. So, but she's also exploring other options, whether we can use non-profit organization to do it. So, but that's actually quite a complicated process as well, because we also have to look into the terms and conditions and different offering by Google, whether what does it mean by non-profit? Does it mean by removing ads? Or is it really free to use, and what does it really mean? And then I start to set up the understanding the scope and the specification and everything. And then not until June, actually in 2017, just a couple months ago. So we find out the non-profit solution didn't really work. It was because there's another solution offered by Google, which is an enterprise, Google Enterprise version, where you can get more access, and there's a non-profit terms where you can apply. But what I find out is that it will also shut down next year. So it doesn't really make sense to go for that direction. So among many other different choices and options, so Cornelia confirmed on the 2nd of August, saying we will go for the limited version by Google, as well as confirm the server hosting. And then by the 24th of August, so it's sort of officially, everything is sort of fixed and pre-launched and announced, like this net.art generator we launched in a limited version manner. So, but what's come to me is so interesting about taking up this project is because it's always my interest, again, like why something is not working and how, and this kind of technical infrastructure, for me, is not something just only about technical, because it's also about culture, about arts, and also about policies and politics as well. So this is something that I'm really interested in. And I know by working on this project, I can able to really think about what are the possible options and what are the limitations and what are the problems right now with the terms and conditions as well. So I will show you briefly about this kind of API concept, just in case if you not sure the ideas of like the backend, how it works with the net.art generator. So you imagine the client is the net.art generator, and then the server is Google. So we send a request to Google with specific parameters. For example, I want to search for something about ZKM. I want to search something about Cornelia. So we give the parameters to Google. Hey, can you return something to me? So this is a request. And then Google will return a response. Okay, this is the thing that you want. So this is the list. So this is the idea about what is a query, what is application programming interface. Is on programming level that you can talk to Google. You can request something and then respond something. So with this concept in mind, which is a very powerful concept nowadays actually in digital culture, because a lot of corporation, like not only Google actually, but also Twitter or Facebook or other Instagram, other social media platforms, they offer different kinds of APIs for developers or for others to access the data. Right? So for net.art generator, we are accessing the search data. But for others, like Twitter, you are accessing the social media data. So there's actually a huge values in providing APIs, and what might be the intentions for corporations offering this kind of APIs, why they offer this. So some of the reasons behind might be because the data can be shared in a wider context, because data can be automated, because it can be programmed with machines, and you can automatically extract like Facebook data like every week, every day, for example. And then you can also do further development. For example, you develop like additional apps like net.art generator by using existing data and to provide new features or new applications. And of course, also portability as well. You can use the data like Google Maps or other kinds of services on different operating systems and allow the data can be redistributed to a wider context. So there's a huge value. And a lot of companies are now offering APIs. So that's the underlying concept about the query, the request, and the response. So this is like an overview of what is net.art generator, what is actually doing behind the interface, behind when you submit. When you type in like the artist name as well as the title, and then you click create. So what is it going on actually within the system. So here is an image, sort of like a sketch of a sense of what is going on. So on your left hand side, which is the image data bank, which is the Google, you can imagine this is like Google data. So when you use Google page to search for image, so you are going through their own API to search for data. And then for net art generator, again, we are using the query to get something, to request something, and then we also get the specific kinds of data. But of course, they are not giving you like the visualized format of the image, but more just a document, like a text file. Or these are the 10 search results that we find this is the answer for you. So for net art generator, there are a few processes. So the first one that I have worked on was like the process Google image search API. So how to really make the communication work with Google from something not working to something that can work. And then of course with the image generation as well by using different random parameters. And as some of you might try the net art generator, even you press the create button like every second, basically most of the images that you see on net art generator, they are different because there are a lot of different effects, overlay, and also other random parameter that have allowed net art generator generate different image from time to time, even you are using the same keywords. So and then on the interface, we also have statistics, which is like the top 10 click of different images. So this is sort of like the overview of what net art generator does. So so by working on this project, I started to look at previous programmer panels, his mind. I also like to read code as well because it's a way to understand how things are structured and also how people are programmed work. So I particularly highlight this URL. This is exactly the line that wasn't work 2 years ago. But the interesting part that I find for this one is even you type the same URL on your web browser right now, it works. It works in the sense that you can search for image by using this URL. But the problem is that it doesn't work in a machine context. It doesn't work in a program. So what Google did before was like from 2003 to 2015, by using this link, it works fine. But then in 2015, we can't use this link anymore. So they have changed some kind of policy. They don't want developer to just use something that haven't been registered, that you haven't provided any kinds of information, that they can't track you. Right? Because by registering like the APIs, you are providing like the telephone number, you are providing your IDs and all sorts of different things such that they can contact you as well. So this is an implications in a way. So just to think about something that is not able to execute. So what is an executable query then? So for me, I think it does not really just only mean that it is malfunction. Malfunction is one thing, right? That's the result. There's something not working. But what is interesting is that it describes non-neutral code that is inscribed with different business logics, political decisions, and software practices. So this is also something related to maybe many of you as well. Like I remember in the old days, we used Adobe Flash or Macro or Director, right? But now everything changed to HTML5. So by changing just something from APIs to a software, it actually changed the whole ecology of software practice as well. So in that sense, I see its impact a lot of different things. It's not just only a technical problem, that's what I see. So this is the new version that I have implemented with a proper registration, an official way a legal way to work with Google with different parameters. And we will talk more about it tomorrow, I think. But just to give you a sense how it works, how it's different from the previous one. And then this is what I call like the JSON file that Google returned to you. So when I request, when you search for something, and it returns a whole list of files. And we have to pass and put on the net.art generator. So, and then the last few things is about different Google options that we have explored for this over the years. So the first one I have mentioned, which is the Google Web URL, without registrations. It's just only a URL. You can type this on your web browser. It works from 2003 to 2015. And then on Google website, we also find there's an official API version as well. But what's interesting is it officially deprecated as of 26th of May 2011. So imagine if you were working on a project that you use Google API and they can suddenly also say it will not work anymore. And then the third option that I have mentioned is like the commercial, the enterprise version, which allow non-profit organization registration. But it will completely shut down by the 1st of April 2018. So what we are using right now is something called Custom Search API. So there are 4 different options that we have explored. And then there are 2 options under this category that we are using. We are using the first one, which is 100 requests per day, which is free. We also have another option that Cornelia just mentioned, is like $5 per 1K request and up to 10K per day. So which is also not unlimited and also need quite amount of money in order to get access. And at the same time, we also think of other alternatives as well, like Bing instead of Google. So this is just a reference point for you to get a sense of how other search engines work in terms of how they charge developer access the data. So by thinking about this kind of inexecutability of a query, so I've been thinking about like, so what does it mean by this error message put up by Cornelia earlier on the website in 2015? And then what is the problem with the error message right now exceeds 100 requests? So I've been thinking about like this kind of update culture. It's part of our culture nowadays. Not just only on net.art generator, but also your phone that you have to update all the time, your Mac, and many other things, right? So, in other words, then this kind of upgrade is not necessarily a means of offering more advanced features. So it might be, but it can be perceived as a disruption because it operates at high levels of unpredictability, uncontrollability, and unknowability across time, in which a query is made inexecutable. So we are in a very vulnerable situation in a way. And then I think this one is more close to your interest in preservation, about across time as well, and what does it mean by something not working from time to time, or something that is work, basically. So, of course, when something is up and running again, like net.art generator, we offer different features. So, for example, like there are new different kinds of language that are supported in net.art generator for this version. But at the same time, some past features are made obsolete. So this implies the possibility for the forthcoming disruption. So even we put net.art generator on live again, there's a possibility of not working again and again. So in that sense, so any upgrade or update includes not only the build of new features, but also the obsolete past and the inexecutable future. So this is sort of how I think about the net.art generator in terms of something that is not working, that is something not executable. So I think that's my part. Yeah. see if you have any question for generating art&discourse around that.
Well, that's a good point to start my part actually, because that's precisely what I've done with the box. So my speech will be shorter because I've only been here 3 months. But yeah, at first, when Morgan told me about your letter in August, yeah, I really liked that project because that's the kind of thing I really like to do. The challenge of restoring something that's not working again, and even if it's not software, also hardware. Because for the new API version for the box, Google is using the JSON plugin to structure the data. And this plugin was not implemented in the box, and the box software, the operating system, was not designed for it at first. So when I tried to just install the plugin, it was not working because it was already too old. So I struggled for many weeks to search the entire internet to find an older version of this plugin, or at least how it works, to try to implement it in the box without having to reinstall everything. And I found something, an old version, the source code of an old version of the JSON plugin, and I manually built it. And it worked for this time. Because what's been said, that's true, I don't think it will work next time Google will decide to change the API. And that's the main problem in terms of preservation. This one, that's what I like net.art generator, because it's really the perfect example for preservation and how we are dependent on commercial enterprises.
But I won't freeze it in time, you know, because we could do an encapsulated version, like freezed, and you can use only limited number of images and keywords, and we could see how it can be executable. But all of those different versions are also a witness of what happened, the political issues and everything, that this is really something. And I was interested in the first version of net.art generator because visually the aesthetic of the first version of net.art generator were really different. And I was wondering if you were keeping some of the images produced by them, and I would like them to be shown next to the work, to show also to the generation, the born digital generation, how was the internet when they were young. And we discovered also in France, we had a blog culture, and it's called Skyblog. And we were all having a blog when we were young. And they kept them. So all the archives of those blogs are still online. You can still access it, and it's really with those GIF and with those beautiful background multiplication background, really typical
GIF patterns in the background,
yeah.
and very flashing.
And so we tried to make a query on Google to search only in those skyblogs the images, so that we could reproduce the aesthetic of the web of my childhood. And we were thinking of doing this with net.art generator, maybe look for creating an API or something that's searching only in this skyblogs. The problem is that those blogs are in French, so the query must be in French. But
yeah,
we found nothing such things in Germany. But we were thinking also to work with active archives, and no, not active archives, internet archives, and the Wayback Machine, maybe to try to stimulate also the aesthetic of the first version of net.art.
Yeah, they have an API.
They also have
search
an API.
on the Internet Archives, actually, and it's called. I written it because it's Heritrix, but that's just yeah.
But I think Internet Archive is only taking screenshots of the websites, and so we cannot remove the images from their.
It's all embedded.
Yeah. But it could be mixed of different websites, so it could be also interesting to have a version of net.art generator making this.
Of course, I was not when I started first this little program, I was not thinking 20 years ahead. I would have archived it in a better way, so it was all a bit random. But what became obvious that it's also it's a tool. It's kind of an archaeological tool in the sense as well that if you look at I saved some of the images. They're still there. But what is interesting is that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you would get completely different, or not completely, but considerably different content returned from the search engine as it is now. And that's interesting. You have the same program, you do the same query, and you get different things returned. So you can like read, how the web or how the internet changed, according to different years when you do research. It's kind of an interesting feature which you only see in retrospect.
Yeah. And I was thinking when Winnie said about the code, how it tells us things. And we made a Bitbucket repository for the code of different versions of net.art generator to understand how it evolved during the years, and you've made it. And I'm always fighting about how we need to keep the original codes of everything and how we should not update everything. And when you show the URL that you could open on your, this is exactly what I'm saying when I'm telling, no, we shouldn't update and see how it was working, because it's totally a witness of that moment, how the internet was working, how the company were working, and how money wasn't the master at that moment. So I'm happy to hear that other people.
That is so interesting as well, because when I try to modify the code, I have that in mind as well. I want to keep the original code there, as I can keep it as much as possible, so that maybe in the future there's another version, something is not working for this version, then you can actually able to trace the history.
Yeah, we saw that they were the comments from the original programmer and then your comments. So you say start here the version of Winnie, and here stop the version of
nice of you
this
to
is
let
so
me
perfect to work with.
Well, the good news is,
good documentation.
despite all the bad news, regarding company policies, etc., is that there's people who enjoy when things are not working. Like Winnie. Like for me, I was never doing the coding myself. I was always collaborating. So my main focus was never on the code itself, but on the implications, what the code does, where it's working. And and I have to say, the collaborations were all fine and interesting. That's maybe something we can also talk about tomorrow, which is interesting because it's a project that I could never have done alone. There was all kinds of collaborations involved over the time. But with Winnie, it has a new quality, I think, because she approached me in the first place because she was doing research for her PhD about the generator, and we did an interview. And I slowly understood where she comes from and how she looks at code, and that for her it's a total excitement if something is not working, because she wants to find out why and she wants to know how to fix, or and all that. And that's for me, okay, that's an interesting thing. And that's why for me we met at Aarhus University, and it was kind of took a while, but after some months I said, well, that's like the obvious collaborator for me. Because I have a project that's going to break all the time, and I have someone who's interested in fixing, but looking beyond the simply the functionality. And I think that's the only thing you can do is kind of get away from this shiny surface presentation, the black box thing, and bring to the surface also the dysfunctional aspects and what is, why are things not working, and make this draw attention to that. I think that's the only.
This is what when you wrote the letter, it's exactly what I thought. Like, oh, she's just taking what's wrong, what's not working, and she's making it like a new artwork content. And I was really interested in this. And since we had open code here as an exhibition, and we were showing the whole collection of ZKM, and that everything is broken and broken and broken again, and this is like this life cycle of digital art, it's just because it's broke all the time, and we also have to exhibit it all the time. And so this is exactly what I thought, like, oh, she's just not wondering why it's not working and wants to restore it. She wants to make a real discourse about it, of course.
But I also find what is interesting for Cornelius, this project is, like, I also experience other software-based work that is not working. But at some point, a lot of cultural practitioners, they sort of able to work around by installing like simulator, right? For example, by having older operating system, then the program can still workable. But what is interesting about this project is the live aspect as well, the liveness of like instant getting the data from the data bank, where a lot of participants and a lot of user-generated content are actually dynamically generated from time to time, and each seconds are basically different. And it depends on where you access the Google search. If you access it from in Germany and in Aarhus or in Hong Kong, they are actually basically different from how they return to you. So it's so difficult to trace, and there's so much dependency on this kind of giant platforms, in a way. So if Google, one day, they go bankrupt or whatever, they close down. So there's a huge problem, in a way as well. So there's this, and other dimension is, it's not just only the software itself, but also a dependency on other external parties that is making something more complicated, or, in a way.
But we have a precedent in France. I don't know if you ever heard of Minitel. It shut down in 2012, and the entire archive just is gone. We have nothing left. The servers are still there, because I talked to France Telecom, and I asked them, but where are the servers, where all the data are? And they were like, they are still there in case of, it was like, in case of what? In case of internet breaks, we still have a communication way. So they keep the servers of Minitel so that we have a...
If the internet is breaking, come to France, we will have the Minitel back.
So we can communicate between each other. And so this is something at PAMAL, because we were both students at the PAMAL lab, which is the Preservation and Art Media Archaeology lab in Avignon Art School. And we worked on that because we lost everything, or it's not accessible anymore. And they were a piece of artworks that were using Minitel. In Brazil, we were working with a Brazilian artist working with Video Texto, which is the Minitel in Brazil. And we restored only, the animation he was making, but it's not online. It's really just on that machine, thanks to an Arduino box. So now our wish is to create another server and make it work, and that you can call from another place this Minitel and from another Minitel and can access it remotely. So this is our wish now. But so we have a precedent on something shutting down and everything is not accessible anymore. And this was kind of really frustrating for the people in France, that it was just, oh, okay, we have nothing anymore. And nobody cared about what was on it. And just now, like almost 10 years after, we are starting to think, oh, we lost everything. So.
And we have a case here too, also of something like that on artwork that we need license, but the company closed. So how do we deal with that? So we have to keep in mind that, yeah, even if Google is a big company, it can close down. That could happen.
And with this artwork, it's a remote control from Shane Cooper. It's on SGI, and we had this problem with the license. And we just talked before to come here with Margit that if we are attacked because we cracked the license of this software, that Margit will go to prison. And we were actually thinking about the copyright of that software, because the company closed. We cracked the software to still using it without license. So if someone is coming, who is coming to tell us that we shouldn't? And we're thinking exactly about the question you were talking about copyrights and things, and we were thinking maybe the programmer of that alive 3D software could attack us. But
perhaps that would more be SGI, I think, because I didn't really hack it. The software, I hacked the SGI. Because I made the whole operating system think it is on another SGI to fool the software, so the license is like, oh, it's this one, it's okay. But that's kind of illegal, strictly.
The inventor of SGI could come to us.
They're right. They don't have personal copyright.
Okay.
So you're safe, I would say.
Okay.
But it's still an interesting case because it's this, you have, I would say you have the moral entitlement to crack it, even if it's legally not correct. Any lawyer would say, you're not allowed to do it, but of course, that's the only thing you can do. So you have to infringe this copyright and break the law in order to make it work. And
that's
morally okay. I think it's just a question. Also, the law is very much behind all these practical problems.
Yeah,
they're catching up.
Specific case
they're catching up, but it will take a long time.
Yeah.
But as a public museum, we have to think about it.
But you have to create a precedent. I think you have to go ahead with the illegal stuff, and that is based on moral entitlement. You have to do it.
So
not
next
me,
door,
not the individual.
We are
artist.
going to Google to Apple next time.
In terms of just APIs, the ideas, because we've got some ideas at the beginning of my residency about net.art generator. It was, of course, we thought about replacing Google API. We were thinking about Q1, which is a French research company like Google, but more respectful of privacy. There was also on internet, I found someone on a forum that posted that, the search API are not quite working, it's changing, so I will code my own, and I like the idea. Because that made me think that even if we change the API, we will be still dependent on the companies. So I also know if we can make our own API, that's more work. So that was all the research. It's just the API, the search API.
Is it possible to connect it then to their searches?
I think it's just making a script which is making
that
fake manually research.
I have also found this kind of API on GitHub as well, but then a lot of the cases they will successfully run for some times and then they actually get blocked again.
Exactly.
So you can't really escape from this cycle of fixing something and then it's not working again and then you get around illegally or legally. You always have to prepare.
That's what I was about to say. That's my research led me to think that those problems are part of the artwork now.
I think
You
so.
always have to think, I'm gonna fix it now, but it's gonna last 2 years, 3 years, perhaps more, hopefully. But we still have to think on the next step.
But I think this kind of something not working or fixing also open up another possibility for thinking about net.art generator. By fixing something, you also generate other kind of discourse and raise different kinds of issues. It's more rich as well.
It's an evolution of the artwork. That's interesting too. So there are plenty of possibilities.
It would be very boring if it would function. Just
I want
limitations on what they're generating the discourses. Any questions?
I want to ask you, talk about copyright, and that's a big problem. And I don't know, my question is, do you work or do you think it's an alternative, something like copyleft, or which other alternative do we have? There is no
copyleft. The thing is that you don't know if the content is under free license or not. That is online. Can be not. So You're just reworking all the things and you find out afterwards. Unless you would create a search that only brings up free content, for example. I mean, you could work with Creative Commons licensed stuff, certain licenses of Creative Commons. Then you wouldn't run into the copyright problem. But of course, all the content that I was interested in, but also a lot of other artists are dealing in, working in this field, they don't want to limit their interests to the stuff that is freely licensed. We are interested in certain things because we want to culturally reference. I want to reference Warhol flowers for certain reasons, so I cannot take another flower image which doesn't come with the reference. So it doesn't solve anything, and the free licenses are all based on the existing copyright. So first the author has a copyright, and then you can put a free license on top of it, and there is no alternative to that model at all. I think copyright, slowly the handling of copyright is changing a little bit. I think the laws are slowly adapting to this idea that there is something like a digital culture that is based on remixing, but it took quite a while.
Then I have a question. Matthew, we already talked about this work from Olia Diagina, the GeoCities project, I think, or morning, or together, I'm not sure. So could this be like a possible collaboration to use? I'm sure you're familiar with the GeoCities project, so for those of you who are not, she and her partner, Dragan Esmerschid, so to say, pretty much saved the GeoCities database, so which is like a kind of free MySpace website toolkit community in the 90s, which was shut down end of the 90s, I think, or 2000. So would this be a possible collaboration to use? Of course, it's a different implication if you would use this as data and not using the Google queries. But would this be possible? Also technically?
I think it would be possible, but that's just not what interests me. I'm not so much interested to work with a certain pool of, that's what also we were addressing, this more archaeological aspect. I'm really interested in the liveness of this program, and because it kind of reflects back what's going on the internet. The problems we are experiencing are the problems not only we experience, but everyone else, and that's exactly what I want to work with and what I want to address in the work.
I think it's more like there is right now about how to be more involved in our past and do something. It's like this nostalgia that is coming now and retro effect, and so we are all eager to use new tools with old pool of images, and I think it's pretty characteristic of the moment right now, like the Super Mic and the Mini and the things like this. We are really like in the recycling, but not of nowadays material, but of past material.
The intention is really a very different one. So it could be an experimental thing to say, okay, we use the images there to generate it, to kind of show the aesthetics of that very phase, but that's not so much what I'm after.
Yeah, but it's weird because it's the first thing we thought about and the first thing we've done, like trying to do it with old images from the old web to see what it could look like. Because we were not here during the first years of net.art generator, we were too young, so we wanted to experience
it, make like a live snapshot of the old version. That's the preservation side of it.
I think that's the freedom. Everyone can use it for their own purposes. You're free to do that.
Yeah. Since the code is online, you can take the code and do whatever you want, and maybe we could do an experimentation with GeoCity,
But also, I think right now, by connecting with Google, there are also other aspects of liveness that is also quite interesting and very specific to the version 5 right now, is for us to think about like why Google returned these 10 images to you, and why is it returned in this priority? What are the possible decisions that the algorithm has been implemented? Depends on your cookies, your browsing history, your locations, and many other business logics like advertisement as well to prioritize their search results as well. So there's also another layer of implications, I think, by working with the project and and we're thinking about what kind of knowledge produced by Google, and especially nowadays we are very rely on Google for explaining things, or when we don't know something and then we just search, and then this becomes knowledge productions. And this kind of parameters that have been implemented in algorithm is also very interesting as part of net.art generator as well.
How they choose, how Google choose the 10 images you
Yeah, because the Google algorithm is quite different from 10 years ago. Because now they are filtering many contents.
Yeah, because when I'm doing the same research in France and in Germany, I don't have the same results, and it pisses me off all the time. But yeah, I didn't thought about this. But there's still a limited pool of images, because when we are using it in France or in Germany, so there will be a limitation.
Different search engines.
Yeah.
Well, that's something we were talking about yesterday. It could be an experiment to say
Mhm.
we do the same thing, same code, the same query,
Yeah.
using different search engine and see what comes as an experiment.
Interesting.
That's what I'm doing for regular searches. When I'm not finding something on Google, I switch to another search engine. So that's perfect.
That you don't find something.
Yeah,
It
sometimes
always
I like
gives
the
you
challenge to not finding something on Google.
He's going in the darknet and everything. So.
Any questions? No. Well, shall we call it a night?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thanks for our invitation.